is Darren Joseph from HEJ.tax, and we're the team that seeks to demystify that sometimes confusing world of international tax. And today we have the honor and privilege of having a great conversation with Michael and Nuno. Michael, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Darren. Good to be here. After a career in consulting in the international tax planning game, I'm now the founder of an investment platform in Portugal with some interesting golden visa qualifying investment products.
Fantastic. And Nuno?
As Michael was saying, thank you very much for the invitation to be here. I'm a tax partner at CMS, which is a Portuguese-based law firm, but present in 45 countries. We have been, and I've been very active in the private clients sector, mostly obviously in respect of taxes, but also touching upon golden visa, and that's why I've been working actively also with Michael in this sector.
Fantastic. Historically, there's been this, let's say, a special tax regime called the NHR Non-Habitual Resident, which provided a more, let's say, a nuanced treatment of tax residents, those who happen to be tax resident in Portugal. And it had the impact of excluding a lot, if not all, of their overseas or their non-Portugal source income. Can you comment on some of the recent changes that have been made to the NHR program?
First of all, the NHR regime, which was a regime we had in place since 2009 and a very successful one, as successful as the golden visa, I would say, came to an end last year on the 31st of December 2024. So, in fact, in practical terms, again, it's still possible to apply for the NHR, but only for people that became Portuguese tax residents until the end of last year. So they have until the 31st of March to do it. But by the time that we are having this conversation, it's not possible to apply now for the former version of the NHR. What happened in the meantime is that we had basically the NHR end was communicated by the previous government around October 2023. And by that time, when the government informed that they wanted to kill the NHR regime, they also created a new regime, which somehow replaces the other, which is what we call a tax incentive for scientific research and innovation. So kind of an R&D incentive. So when this regime was created at the end of 2023, there was no regulation about how to apply for the regime. And we were in the same situation for the entire 2024. And only very close to Christmas time, and 23rd of December, if I'm not mistaken, 2024, we had the first version of a regulation of this new regime. So what this new regime brings is, strictly from a tax perspective, it's very similar in terms of the benefits that the regime has. And I'll explain that in a bit more detail. But the main difference is that on the original version of the NHR, someone would have access to it by only becoming Portuguese tax resident, provided that that person was not a Portuguese tax resident in any of the previous 5 years. So you would get access to the title, to that status, and that status would be valid for 10 years, provided that you would stay or remain as a Portuguese tax resident for those 10 years. And then we would check the kind of income that the person is receiving throughout those 10 years, and we would check whether or not the person is really benefiting or not from the NHR. And obviously, we as lawyers, we try to make sure that the way that the client would receive the income would be obviously in the most tax-efficient manner. When you compare the original version of the NHR to this new tax incentive that we will call NHR 2.0, just because it's easier than to use the Portuguese name that they've granted the regime, you also need to not have been a Portuguese tax resident over the past 5 years. You need to become one. But on top of that, throughout 10 years, you need to have an employment relationship or a self-employment relationship with a Portuguese entity and in very specific areas of activity and or with very specific companies that comply with the specific rules. So when I look at both regimes, the first one was clearly one that we could sell as a product to the public. This one, the way that, based on what we already know, because there are still some regulations missing, it's something that is more oriented for Portuguese companies that have now a new instrument to attract talent to come and work for Portugal. But to be honest, we as advisors, what we've been trying to find is that knowing that most of our clients that have their own businesses, and if they come to Portugal, they don't really want to work for someone else. They want to create their own business. So we are trying to find ways under this new regime to make sure that they also benefit from the regime. And there, if you allow me, just going into the regime itself. So the regime basically foresees the application of a flat personal income tax rate of 20% on employment income and self-employment income or professional income obtained in Portuguese territory, deriving from those eligible activities that I was mentioning. And on the other hand, it provides for a full exemption on non-Portuguese sourced income, so income obtained abroad, provided that they don't come from tax haven. There is a list of tax havens published by the Portuguese law, which is quite extensive, so it's much more extensive than the EU list. And this exemption applies to foreign employment, self-employment, income, dividends, royalties, interest, rental income, capital gains on the sale of shares or financial products. So when you compare again both NHR 1.0 and NHR 2.0, the main difference on the NHR 2.0 is that, for example, pension income, which used to be taxed at the 10% flat rate on the NHR 1.0, is no longer protected on the NHR 2.0, meaning that the pension income, even if coming from abroad, will be included in the general, on the global income of a Portuguese taxpayer, and which is liable to tax at the Portuguese progressive rates that can go up to 48%. Okay, so for pensionists, things got worse. For everyone, things got a bit more bureaucratic. But for example, in respect of capital gains on the sale of shares, there is a big difference, because in most cases, which by the way, which was not the US case, because the US has a special situation, but in most of the other countries, the capital gains that would be assessed by a Portuguese NHR by selling shares of a non-Portuguese company would be taxed in Portugal, whereas under the new regime, they are completely excluded from taxation, and that's a big difference that has been generating a lot of buzz and interest from clients.
Okay.
Just to also comment on this, still in this respect. So the application for this regime needs to be submitted until the 15th of January of the year following the one the person became a Portuguese tax resident, but it will be through an official form that is yet to be published. So we are discussing a regime which is not really feasible, just because we are still missing some formalities on how to apply for it. And as I also mentioned, there is a list of activities and companies slash sectors in which those activities will need to be performed so that the individuals can qualify for the NHR 2.0. The list is still incomplete. We are expecting additional rules to be communicated by the government anytime soon. And as I was saying, considering that most of our clients are clients that want to start their own business or run their own business, that missing list of activities will be relevant. And when I look at the things that we already know, I think that the option that probably will be the one that we will use the most from the information that we already have would be probably the possibility of setting up and working for Portuguese certified startups. So implementing or incorporating a Portuguese startup is not that difficult. By the way, because we are talking to Michael that works on operates in the fund ecosystem, having received or capitalization from a Portuguese private equity fund or even from a foreign private equity fund is one of the ways for a company to qualify as a certified startup. So I'm pretty sure that we will find a way for our clients to either create or invest in a Portuguese startup, or potentially to invest in a fund that in turn invests in startups and make sure that they get access to the NHR 2.0. We just need to have a bit more clarity on how will the regime be applied, and I'm sure that we will still be able to turn this into something successful.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for that very comprehensive overview. Michael, if someone wanted to reach you to find out more about golden visa opportunities, what's the best way to find you?
Reach out directly. I've always experienced such a warm welcome in Portugal, and people looking at the jurisdiction, I'm happy to make sure they get the same level of experience. Email, it's available on my website, through LinkedIn. I'm generally very, very responsive. Looking forward to engaging with a few more people.
Michael Maxwell on LinkedIn. And what's your website? What's your URL again?
It's portugalpanorama.com. So email address is michael@portugalpanorama.com.
Fantastic. And Nuno, what's the best way to find you?
Look, I think that, again, the email is an option, which is nuno.santos@cmsportugal.com. I think it's probably the best way. And then obviously you engaging, we can talk via WhatsApp or phone. It's fine. All of them work.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And we'll see you next time.